So, not exactly sure where to start. Saying the MS. I think we're going to read through Shtickle the Priyudat first, and then we're going to try and understand what exactly he's saying, and how it connects to everything we're saying until now. So this is the Priyudat's Pashas Puru, which is V'yakal Pekidai. It's the Pashas V'yakal Pekidai, but it's on Pashas Puru. We're not going to learn the whole thing. We're going to learn, I think, from Oz Daled. I split up in Oisius. It's not in the side of it's one long thing. I split into Oisius like that whenever we need to reference something. It's not easier. Otherwise, I have a long gariches. So we're going to start in Daled. How am I going to touch every single word? We know we do Shon Kodesh, but I try to bring out the points which I think are important, the salient points, and we'll take it from there. So the shallow that he started before, at least from Oz Gimels, basically is a Pashas, the Zohar Pekidai to Astira. There's a Astira from what in the Mishkan. It says Mekchim Itchem Tirime. Itchem is a minimal, like from them as opposed to from everybody. And it says Mashankan. The other pasuk says Mekol Nadiv Live. Kol Nadiv Live means whoever wants, as opposed to you're going to take only from certain people. So Ma'ila is a Shikal Astira. The Zohar says that Chilu beginning of the Eidevrav, himself was only Mechim Itchem Davke. So that's what he's going to come to explain. We're not saying I get to the answer now, but that's what he's saying. Ve'inin he, so for infinite the shal, it means to explain what the Zohar means. That's the stira, Shnaim Mura Shas. One is the famous singing, Oilam Yom Udam Shaloi Lishma, Shtoich Kach Buddha Lishma. So see that what they make learn, they don't even have to learn Shaloi Lishma, it's the only way to get to Lishma. Zweite Sheit, Ma'amar Soiser, is Ka'ala Loim Shaloi Lishma, Noich Lishma Evach Shlius Yalpuna. Here, Chazal obviously it means you're not allowed to. If it's saying, Ka'ala Loim Shaloi Lishma, Noich is better if it was never born, is Bechech means you're not allowed to learn Lishma. And Mashank Chazal tell us that the Oilam Yom Dudam Lishma, Betoich Shaloi Lishma, Bu Lishma. Famous theater. The Sholim already asked this question, right? I've got Peshi. But he's referring to he himself. That's a Parsha Zvudim. I brought the Parsha Puru because it has the next part of the Shema also. But either way, that's all. I'm going to say I'll prepare basically the mushal that he gives in Parsha Zvudim. How do you use Parsha Zvudim? Kapeshi, that what he, that when it says Shaloi Lishma, that when it says a Noich Loi, that basically in the Hapach Shal Yusoi Alpuna, in other words, never, it would have been better if it was never been born. He's referring to his whole kavun is only Shaloi Lishma. Yeah, Kva Perashti, I was reading my father, she has Shaloi Lishma Levad. Sha'ain Kavnusa Kim Lezai. You only want to learn Shaloi Lishma. Whatever that means. Again, you have to understand, we're learning using terms of Lishma, Shaloi Lishma, we still don't even know what the Shaloi Lishma means. And that's obviously extremely important, but basically it's being magdir. It says, is better if was only Shaloi Lishma. Only wants to do the Shaloi Lishma. Masha'ain Kain, it says, is Misharoisa look if it's Asma Lishma. He wants to be'etzem, well, the Yalein Lishma. He wants to learn Lishma. No, but Dayan Logia, like Yulamas, he didn't get to that Darige. Of them Zukman as Ya. That Shaloi Lishma Buddha Lishma. The mushal he gives in Pasha Zvudim is said it basically is if somebody wants to go get the diamonds and leave the earth. So the whole avodah, the whole thing of digging up the whole thing is obviously it's not what it's a duvin nimis. But at the end of the day here is it's a tenai of to get the matmoinim, to get the diamonds, and to get anything which is underneath is only possible if we dig. So that's a mushal which he gives in the Vudim. So basically, it's as so Pri Uretz is Magdir. He's not Magdir. We don't know what Lishma means and what Shaloi Lishma means at this point. But we do know that the act as was, that Shaloi Lishma, the Chazal tell us that the Noich Loi, Shaloi Nivru, if you learn Lishma means the whole kavun is only to learn Shaloi Lishma. This is Nepech Loi. Masha'ain Kain, they said, L'oilam yom adudam lishma, Shaloi Lishma, Shatach Shaloi Lishma, Bu Lishma, is referring to Be'etzem Evolein Lishma. Now, he's not holding it at Darge. And to use the mushal which he gives, and the reason the mushal is important is because he's saying here that is the rite of passage. To get to Lishma, Nafman, you have to do Shaloi Lishma, which in itself is a very stark reading, it's a very sharp reading, because Tamaz and Pashmal and Chazal, that Oilam Yom Dunu Shaloi Lishma, Shalach Shasham Bu Lishma, means is, Mekenish Lein Lishma, is Leitim Lishma. The Rambam in Nechtam Torah, Nechashiva, when he's magded and bringing out this this Chazal. I don't want to get too much into it because it's whenever we mention the Rambam, we have problems with the Rambam. It's Maimonides, that's a separate thing. But basically, the Rambam, when he brings down the Hilchos Shiva and Hilchos Talmud Torah, the two places of Shaloi Lishma Lishma, he says that you teach the kinder, you teach the kids that you should learn. You should always learn Lishma. You should always learn Shaloi Lishma. I mean, that they don't understand the concept of the Shema, so b'maila you could teach them and give them matmoinim, give them prizes and these things, and eventually you'll be megale razeh of the concept of what Lishma means, or what he says. And again, we're not being magda right now what Lishma means. This is the process, the way of getting from Shaloi Lishma to Lishma. So basically, is that we have two things. We have Lishma. The Shaloi Lishma means you only want to learn Shaloi Lishma, which is also interesting. So what does it mean you only want to learn Shaloi Lishma? So it's ardich as nishma, meaning the only. Because it says, right? Shehi kva parashni shehi Shaloi Lishma levad she'ain kavenusa kiyim lezeh. Let me say at this point, this is what he wants to do. Right? The thing we're saying without the Middah Shaloi Lishma, because Shaloi Lishma Bu Lishma, is referring to what? That he wants ikadin volalein Lishma, but he can't learn Lishma. Right? Lishma, he didn't get to that point. And as a Gidamushal is, again, if you want to get to the treasure, which is buried underneath, you have to dig and get yourself dirty. Lamase, that's not your point, but that's what you have to do. So that's what it means. So just to recap, the difference here is a basic reading Chazal. A Chazal is that about it, you can learn Lishma, Nish Lishma. If you can't learn Lishma, then we'll do a heter for Shaloi Lishma, Lishma. For the Uretz is being this a lot more, he's sharpening it very much. He's saying it's not Pshat is that there's also learn Lishma. Mechanic, you have a heter to learn Lishma. Is then the only way to get to Lishma is through learning Shaloi Lishma. And something happens that Mitoich Shaloi Lishma Bu Lishma. So now, what does this mean? This is Shema Mishloim Melech L'Shulim. I'm going to go through this part very quick. Shema Mishloim Melech L'Shulim Apashas Puru. Amarti Echim U'Virichoykem Meni, that this whole concept of the Shema and Shaloi Lishma is really what Mishloim Melech said on Puru, on the mitzvahs Puru, which is the Shloim Melech Nu Pashas. Everything about Moshe Baini, Avil Pashas Puru. Again, whatever that means. But Shalom Melech knew everything until Puru, the Tamai mitzvahs. And Himartu, he said on Puru, Echkimu V'Hirechaykim Meni. Why? So you pay this because the whole din of Puru Adimu is B'minit Al Yimilse. And the definition of a minute is that it's something which is not understood. Now, we're not going to get into right now what a minute means in the Mishnah's Piriuretz. It does not mean that basically is right? Because is an oxymoron. It's impossible to say I don't understand something, but I actually believe it. Because the definition of believing means to say is you know what you're believing. So if you don't understand it, if you have to make yourself believe something, that means you don't believe it, right? If I believe it, well, then I believe it. Meaning, what does belief mean? How can there be belief without knowledge? Right? So I skipped the whole step, right? Well, how can there be belief without knowing what I believe? Or let's sharpen the question. Can I make myself believe something which I don't believe? The answer is no. You can't make yourself believe something you don't believe. If you don't believe it, you don't believe it. Right? So if you believe it, then if you don't know what you believe, then you don't believe it either. I can only believe something which, if we're saying belief means a cognizant understanding, means something which is an actual knowledge. Right? That's the thing. In other words, generally speaking, sorry, I jumped in right in the middle of a Langa Pasha. In a nutshell, because it's not really the main point of it. I mean, if we get to the next part, but belief, knowledge, which way you understand it, I can't know it, therefore I believe it. So what does it mean? What does it mean you believe it? That means I believe that it's such and so, even though I don't know what it means. I don't know, I think it's a good mushal. If I don't understand, if you don't know what you're believing, you can't believe it, right? Because otherwise there's no object what you're believing. When I say I'm professing belief, right? So, the mystery of the Trinity, right? The Trinity is a mystery. So why is it a mystery? Because I can't understand it. Because it can be three is one. But if you can't understand it, then just saying I believe that it is so and so, because I know it can't be so and so, is an oxymoron. You can't make yourself believe something we know is not true. You can't make yourself believe 2 + 2 = 5. No matter how much you try, you're never going to believe it. Why? Because you can't believe something you know is not to be true. That means so belief, and then if I'm saying it that I believe that, I'll say a random word, that I think any made-up word, right? That which means nothing is unbelief either. And if I say, if I'm going to give me any made-up word, I can't think of anything made-up word. No, but hello. I mean, hello. Technically, right? Hello, Betzim doesn't have any meaning, but Ra. I don't know. Ra is the name of the thing, but whatever. Right? Let's say it means it's nothing, right? So if it has no content, then you can't have any belief in it either. Belief has to be belief in something, which means it has to be something which has to make rational sense. Otherwise, or has to be rationally possible. So you say is, I don't know if that is the case, but you're telling me this so and so happened, so I'll believe you that so and so happened because it's rational that it is so. But it also means I don't believe that that is actually the case. I believe that that's what you told me that you saw so and so, because the belief can go beyond the person, the agent, which is telling me what it is. So a minna in general, in the Torah, does not mean as a tata zoy gezuk, that's what I believe. A tata zoy means you believe that your father said so and so, not that you believe that the object of what the father is saying. But again, this is a longer, so we'll get to it eventually, but that's, when he says a minna, the point you're trying to say, when he says a min over here, it does not mean a minna such a thing. A minna pshita, zoy tata gezuk, zoy gleibich. That's not what he means. A minna is something which is a mala b'tam v'das, is something which can be experienced, but not explained, not spoken, and not elaborated on. That is what a minna means in a nutshell, meaning mamash b'ketzinim in b'mishnas, priurets, and in general, really. And Oibesoy is saying that the reason why Purudimu was impossible to understand is because the definition of what it is a minna, which does not mean as ich verstehe es, ich schreibe hand, and ich leib so beschäftigt gesagt. It's not what it means. It means say something which is not something which cannot be brought into a form through words, brought down. So this will have to do for this the time being. Otherwise, you're going to get completely off track. Either Chamam door Medical Shulam of mitzvahs in general Chashafti Druchi Vishivi Ragli El Idasechu Shra Parashti and different the Yosi do I give you. He's going to go back later explain what the Melech means. I mean, as Idas and that we're not going to get to that. So I'm not going to spend too much time in it. But now Shra Parashti Yosi do it. Yosi shall give you Chomer Ucher. The gift is a Chomer Ucher. Now, was referring to how does it have? Okay, I'm just going to, one more thing is, I'm just going to bring out the points that I want to bring out. I'm going to skip many of other points, I think, because it's not in the guy right now what it is. Which eventually, throughout the weeks, we'll understand more what I believe he's trying to say. The gift is a meaning it's not a spiritual being, as the neshama, the nefesh. Right? If it's a it's not maskim to do what the cycle tells it should be done just for the sake of doing it. You have to explain it in something which can have an understanding. Right? What does that mean? This is an important point. What he's saying over here is, we're trying to explain them as Shema and Shaloi Lishma, right? That's what he's saying over here. So he's saying, I'm explaining to you this distinction which I made between Lishma, when you're loimed only, I'm not ki'im Shaloi Lishma, you almost to do Lishma, or using Lishma, Shaloi Lishma to get to Lishma, is a concept of mitzvahs in general, what Shalom Melech said. And now, I'll explain it to you, that what does Shalom Melech mean to say, that, as already said, the gif is a Chomer Ucher. And there's a gift of Chomer Ucher, it's not masking to do anything, only if something can have an explanation at Tfisa boy. What are the things which a gift can have? And that is a Shaloi Lishma concept. What is a Shaloi Lishma? Vus, a gift can verstehen, the gift can understand it, and through that it will agree to do what the Zeichel is telling it to do, what Zeichel is telling it to do, the Lishma part. Right? So there are three things. Yiras Oynish, Schar Oilam Habu, or Nachasriach V'tanik Shemagish V'avedusa V'avudus Hashem. The pre-uretz is telling you something, it's something which is really not something which you'll ask, I mentioned from Gas, what do you like Mishlei Lishma? Has Nachas Riech V'tanik Shemargish Avdus Avudus Hashem? That is a Shloi Lishma. The Nachas Riech, a tiny person had a doom, Shmak Adavon, this is a Shloi Lishma. Now this is necessary in order to get to Lishma. But that is the Lamasa, the Shaloi Lishma. What's this mitzvah, what you're allowed to do? The Shaloi Lishma, which is not allowed, is you only have a mind Ki'im Shaloi Lishma. Now again, we don't know, is that the same Shaloi Lishma as this? So in other words, it's a Shaloi Lishma, what I just told you right now. It's Charo Elam Habu, Nachas Riech, V'tanik, Shmash, but that's all you want, as opposed to understanding and using this as a stepstone to get to Lishma, which you still don't know what it is. Lamasa, be'emesh einshim hasugim asegis to face it. So why is take shemargish avoidus of havas Hashem is considered shaloi lishma? How is that possible? Look, it was very simple. Be'emesh einshim hasugim asegis to faces had vaikis v'miti ba'einself b'shem cycle. Koshim agusha v'tani. He says to the Vapusha, look at the period. It's impossible for a cycle to be'etzim, for any person, meaning for a person to be masig or to be toifis and to be able to say and explain what the Vaikus means in Ein Sof is by definition, if you could say how good something was, if you actually remember it and understand it afterwards, that means it was not actual Vaikus. By definition, if actual Vaikus is something which cannot be understood, and so the question obviously is then the Busya. I'll explain in a minute. But either way, that means if you did understand it, if you did feel it, if it's something which you could, then by definition, it's not actual Dvaikas. So it's a Shaloi Lishma. V'uraya, Kikloi Berash Hashem. Aval Dvaikas v'miti, Acher HaMurgish, Dvaikas v'miti, Acher HaMurgish, Hi Hasha'ayne Murgish Hashem Tvisa. That means, I put a comma in the wrong place. Aval Dvaikas v'miti, is Acher HaMurgish, is after you already finished the Dvaikas. I said that's the famous thing with Chassidus as Rutz V'Shav. No one can stay, and it's precisely for this reason. That's why you can't stay. But again, we're not getting into that part right now. About Dvaikas Amiti is Acher HaMurgish. Once you're already Margish, here Sha'ayne Murgish and Tvisa. That's afterwards. You can't explain it. There's no Tvisa. There's almost barely Rishima. V'raya Koran. All right, I think right now this is enough for what I wanted to start off. We'll leave it for now. Hopefully we'll get back to it by the end of the night. So now. There are three terms which I want to clarify before we continue where we left off last week. The first term is basically just one's a clarification of what's a Middah, right? We were speaking very much of Middah. We said there's 3 points of a Middah. There's a Middah, the external feeling, the external action. Otherwise, the internal feeling. And the third thing is the interpretive mode, basically the thing that which the external stimulus, which something was outside and made the person feel, and that was interpreted through that, and that's how you got through the next 2 steps, right? That was a nutshell. We'll explain a lot more today, but that's just, so one thing is very important to understand that I'm using the word Middah, it seems like I'm using the word Middah as a event. In other words, it's something that happened. It's something which was a feeling which a person felt. He felt anger, he felt kas, he felt gava, he felt any single thing, right? Any emotion that was felt. In other words, it's a performance or it's an event which happened to the person. But classically, be'etzem, when we say a middah, we're referring to really more a disposition. A person is predisposed for a certain thing. Think about it. The word bal gava. What does a bal gava mean? He's the owner of gava. Gava is not really a physical thing which you can own, right? So shaykh the shaykh can balance for a reason, because there's nothing. It's really nothing, right? So it was why? What does it mean about gava? Well, anything about gava, about tava, about kishn, anything. What we mean to say is it's a disposition, and therefore that whatever person has, whatever person experiences, will be seen and experienced through that lens. That's what's called the bal gava. So bal gava means to say is somebody that his whole lens, his whole worldview, his whole way of seeing any action is through the lens of what will always lead to or always be interpreted through gava. For instance, if a person, the same masa, you can see one person would go and skip a person by simcha and for some reason the person missed out the person, he didn't shake his hand, whatever it was, right? So somebody who's has not, whatever, no one person there, he forgot. A person that sees through everything, the lens through, let's say, either let's say, has low self-esteem, or he always, gava generally speaking has to do with a person who's very highly of himself. Again, this is obviously a caricature, I'm trying to bring out a point. is he will see that no, that it was done at dafke because he wanted to spurn me. He wanted to do anything. He wanted as dafke zagetin. Why? He say maase, but interpretive lens is different. Why? Because it's this position to see, to interpret the act is so and so. So somewhere the middah, even though the person is feeling something, right? But the third point, meaning the third part, which is the interpretive lens, is really the disposition that this person has. That is really, so even though we're saying many times that the person he experienced chaos, right? He experienced chaos, experienced that. So it's an event, it's an experience the person experienced. That is one way of using the word middah. The other way of using the word middah, mitzvah, is a disposition a person has to a certain event. Right? He feels chaos because that is his disposition at times. That's time a clarification. He's going to be the guy for the next part of the chinuch, which we're going to get to. The other part is now here, there's two very important words. One's called behavior and one is called intention. And in Mission, probably the next few weeks, we're going to speak a lot about it, which is why it's also important to bring up now. And we're not going to explain the full thing right now, but we're going to mention a few words and a few distinctions I think is very important going forward. The first thing is behavior versus action. What is behavior? Behavior, we know what a behavior means, right? Behavior means watch a person. Let's say I'm watching a group of people, right? So I'm observing their behavior. What's a behaviorist? A person that's watching animals, right? He's watching his animal behaviors. He's watching how animals interact with one another. Now that is behavior. The many different actions. I'm watching people. I could watch a person write a check. I could watch a person give money. I could watch a person speak softly or speak in anger. I'm seeing many different behaviors. However, this behavior is not an action. It only becomes an action when I understand the process behind it. What is? I want to be careful because non-intentional. Intention is the next step, right? So the action would be, for instance, that a person wrote, let's say wants to write a check, right? So he took out a pen and he wrote a check, right? So that is the behavior. The action was what he did with the check, that he gave tzedakah, or he paid off a vendor, whatever it is, right? So it's different. Behavior is the external action which I see. But the action, it becomes an action when there is some story which I see happening, which is why animals, generally speaking, because animals are basic, we don't really see their thought processes, right? So therefore, when I'm really observing animal behavior, it's harder, for instance, to understand children because what we're really observing is behavior, not so much action, right? There's no necessarily a story which is happening. It can be a bunch of random action, right? Obviously, kids have conversations, right? They're not even speaking to each other. He cites all that says that I saw a fire truck outside, and the kid answers that it's cold. No shaykhs. That's how they speak, right? It's a bunch of behavior, and it's harder to take a unifying action over it. So that is one thing. The next thing which is important, and this is a lot more. It's called an intentional philosophy, and it's going to be very negaya, especially because the one that in modern philosophy, meaning at the 1950s, approximately in the 50s, 60s, that she wrote a book on attention, and then a few articles. Her name was Elizabeth Anscombe. It's not Anscombe, it's Anscombe because whatever, it's British, and it says it's important because intention, and we'll start with, let's start from Torah source, Chazal, right? We know there's something called the owness, and there's something called, obviously she doesn't take an owness or shoyik and these things, but you see how these terms in general helps us understand things, and which is why it's important, but also it's very easy to completely misunderstand, because in general there's a problem with philosophy. The problem with philosophy is that, there are many issues with philosophy. One of the issue I want to bring up now is that if you understand we have oinus and we have a shoygik, right? Now, there was the difference between an oinus and a shoygik. Well, one is forced, one is coerced, and one is done by mistake. There's something even a sharper category called mit'asek. And a mit'asek is bechlal lo yutzu, right? Mit'asek Mit'asek and Shabbos is also puter. That's the lowest level of, I think, the shoygik is more, the mitzvah obviously is more, a oinus is different. These are all different names of actions which a person can do. And the question over here is halachic categories are very different. And Shala is a shoygik, we have a pusik that says that it's pusik. A oinus, well also, right, it says, how do we know oinus? But now in the oinus says putik, it says, lenada l'sasa dovid. Mis'asek, it's a medibin l'shoyin, a metoisis, and these things, if me'etzim need a pusik or not. But the difference over here would be that a mis'asek is the masa is bechal not nesiachis to the person. Why? That the masa that a person did something mis'asek means that he had no intention whatsoever to do the story. Again, this is machlok shishon, exactly what is considered mis'asek, right? He had two in front of him, not was a mistake. We're not getting into that thing because it's not in the guy now. I'm trying to bring out a point of mis'asek. Now, mis'asek basically says I had no intention to do what happened. Napshat is I intended to do something, but I didn't know it's usir, or I didn't know that this masa or today is Shabbos, which is a shogeg. Now that I was coerced to do the masa, which is oinus, mis'asek means I had no intention to do the masa, and that is puter, and you don't even necessarily pashas don't even need a pusik for it. Why not? Because there is no hisyachis of the masa to the person. Why not? Because for a person to consider an agent means that a person is doing something, right? That in order that a person should be considered the agent of the action that happened, he has to have something called intention. He has to have intended to have done it, right? In oinus then, which he intended to do the action but didn't want to do the action, is very different. The question is oinus by definition, pasha, in fact I need a pusik, pshat is a Torah telling me that, right, is a chakir. Is oinus pshat, bechal didn't do the action, didn't do it at all, or oinus say is he did it, but Torah says he's puter. Now, if oinus means if he actually did the masa and only his puter, if he didn't even, it's not like he didn't even do the masa, why need a pusik for it? Because the pusik is only telling you, pusik is a petar, telling you did the action, but you're puter. Is oibazoi. In that case, we see that there's a very important point midin Torah. In order for an agent, in order for an action to be mesiachis after the person that did it, in order for him to be considered an agent, there's something called intention. And intention then is a very important category, even in halacha, and it makes big ramifications. The problem over here is, how do we define intention? What does it mean I wanted to do something, right? Now, this category is very important for anything, for let's say the concept of lishma. Why? Because the definition of lishma is it's an action that a person is doing for any masa, really, right? That's what you explained. It's an oinus, misasik, that it's a person doing an action. The person is an agent. He has to have intention. The mean to say is anytime I'm dealing with a person doing an action, I'm dealing with a philosophy of intention. What is considered? What makes the action be considered the person is doing it? Which also means that if I misunderstand the category of intention, then I will misunderstand many other categories, right? If the understanding of, let's say, lishma is dependent on what it means, what intention means, that if I misunderstand what intention means, I will then misunderstand what lishma is, which also means I will criticize Rishonim or Chasidus or the Baal Tanya with their understanding of lishma because I misunderstood what intention really means, which is why it's a very important thing to understand and explain correctly. So, the modern category, the brought up, basically what we're dealing with was somebody called Elizabeth Anscombe, and we're going to get probably next week a lot more into the nuances of intention. All I want to now is in the guy now, because we're technically dealing with the shaloi lishma, not with the shma, is that intention is what is needed, that the agent should be, that the action should be mesiachis after the agent, which means to say is that it's explaining that when the agent did an action, he did it for such and such purpose. It's his or her intention. So an action is defined by the intention of that the person wanted to do. That is technically what intention means. Now again, this is a lot to unpack, and it's negaya to a lot of things, even in halacha technically it's negaya to the correct understanding, but right now let's go back to what we were discussing until now, and we'll get in the end, hopefully we'll bring this all together. Now, 3 weeks ago, I think it was 3 weeks ago, right? We basically came up with the concept that there's no such thing as a person having akdumas, right? A plain reading without knowing, without coming with a personal pre-understandings of certain things. And the question here then is not if we're coming with akdumas. The question is, can the Torah challenge our akdumas, right? It's not the shot is that I'm coming with a blank slate. I realize that I acknowledge that I'm coming with my modern understanding of many different categories. The question is, can the Torah challenge my understanding of it? Or the question is, or am I going to impose my understandings onto the Torah? Which is why it's important to know the modern categories that we're dealing with, right? This is also part of a bigger conversation of exactly how culture and the person gets formed. Because there's no such thing as a person being formed without culture, by definition. Which is why the times change, precisely because culture changes. And what the question is, the more comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? If culture forms the person gets formed by culture, then which came first? But these are, get to it eventually. Which is why it's important to know our categories of culture, because otherwise you don't really know what we are. Now, at Yidden, yes, we have an interesting, we also have the concept of Torah, which is the fourth wheel, what we were saying that the Torah is telling us, right, what you should be unifying yourself around, what, I'll recap it in a minute, but ultimately, our life now is very different than it was 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. And as such, we have to know the categories where we're coming from in order to help us to make sure to realize, to be aware of our biases when we approach any single topic or sugya. Now, that was what we said 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, the discussion was we made a tripart, we spoke to the therapy, right? Discussion of therapy. And we said that there's a telos, there's a concept of which is broadly speaking, whatever the Torah is telling us, right? Whatever the gehadis, the goal of your life, whatever the tachlis of the person is, and the tachlis of the person does not necessarily, it's bechlal, the tachlis of a person is not necessarily the tachlis of the world. In other words, they're not married one to the other. You can say the person has one tachlis and the world as such that's not the same thing. Right? The Rambam says it clearly. The Ramchal obviously does argue on it, right? It's okay, right? So the question is, the machlok is between Kabbalah and the Kabbalists and the philosophers in general or not. The question is do you even have to say that? Priyudas Pashas does say, the Shalmi would seem to say that it is. At least says every single Bria in the world. Right? Well, all we have in the Pusik is really saying that the world, every single part of the world is created for Hashem's glory, right? It doesn't say, so it means we are created for Hashem's glory too. It doesn't mean that the world is created for us to help us facilitate Hashem's glory in that sense. Or it could be all interconnected by definition. If I'm the Hashem, and that also means ultimately all the same thing. So when my Kvod Shemaim by definition is incorporate everything is all Kvod Shemaim. It's possible. Yes, it's all separate in the Shvis and the Nagai, really.
So basically,
say it again?
Right. So basically, you go back to Torah is for a person, so obviously everything is for the person.
So yeah, but that was you made a jump. You said that everything is created for the Torah, and the Torah for the Aibish, and the
is Torah. So all the
and the Torah was created for us. That's right, something that
Torah is comes to teach us. So,
yeah, but it doesn't mean because that is one of its functions doesn't mean it's the only function, right? That's that is a leap. It doesn't mean everything. There's no question that we're part of the master plan. If otherwise it means that everything was created without a reason. The Rambam himself clearly, right? He says that it has to be. He says in two places, but it basically says that the world. Right? He says clearly that it can't against the Middah, but it can be that the world was created without a reason. Because without any purpose, it was stam created without any telos, without any straight. Otherwise, that means Hashem did a master shav. It's impossible. But the Rambam says clearly in the beginning of Chai Gimel that the world itself does not mean that I think it's Chai Gimel that part in the beginning that it does not create it for us. It doesn't mean the world. He doesn't say in the Chalik Bais. He doesn't say well. He says we don't know. And he says Shnegaya. That's what he says. It's a difference. But again, this is not besides. Yeah, and then we're rolling here. So we're saying that the three. I got telos. Yeah. So telos, which is tachlis of the person, or Torah, whatever, doesn't make a difference. This is a rach. Then we had. They said the action, the therapy, the therapeutic method, which is what that speaker was saying against. And then we said Lamasa that leaves out the main important part, the metapsychology. We're calling it metapsychology. We say is the structure, the person. If again, how do you interpret it, right? Because somebody has anxiety, it doesn't mean that anxiety is coming from the Torah, meaning a correct Torah perspective. It could be coming with something which is wrong. It has to be healed in one way or another. So stam, in other words, just the therapy, the description doesn't tell us the source. And then the only way to tell me therapy is in a brown light, you have to know the source. That is what metapsychology is telling you how to interpret it, the person. Then last week we spoke about the 3 tier of the Middah. There's external, which we sort of recapped before. There's the external Middah, the external action, the event that the person that we see, and that, if you want to bring it to terms before, that is the behavior. We observe the behavior. A person went and a person got angry and he broke the glass. Right? That's the for that reason. Right? Or a person went. I watched when a person got very happy and he gave somebody money, whatever it is. Meaning a tzedakah thing. I mean, he gave more than he normally would give. Right? That is behavioralism. That's what I saw. That's what I watched. That's what I noticed as a person. Then there is the internal feeling. We said that'll be the makes the behavior into an action. The internal thing with the internal story that the person had. Right? That is the second aspect. The third aspect was the person as such, which interpreted the external stimuli, which then made the person act the way he acted. Those are the 3 levels of a Middah, right? That's what we discussed last time. Now we spoke about the Chinuch, the famous Chinuch that says Udam nifal kafi pe'olusav. And the problem over here is, now I'm going to say the problem in one sentence, and then we'll elaborate with why I think it's actually a very big problem. That according Stamazoi, every action, by definition, comes from an eternal reason. The person decided to do it. Otherwise, that person didn't do it, right? So, how in the world can you say a person udam nifal kafi pelusov? The person wanted to do something. The person didn't want to do something. He's do it anyways, and therefore is going to change your whole life. But the person did it for a reason, as is. So it's not as the mitzvah is. There was already an internal reason which caused me to do the external act. So how is this external act changing my internal reason? That is a question in short, and we're going to unpack it in more things. Stamazoi, the way we learn it, is we learn that the Chinuch, with the Nefaka, in Mitzvah Tazayin, Mitzvah Chov, says multiple places, like I think 4 times, he says the concept, I think Tazayin is where he says more about Ichis. We're not going to be in delusion, whatever, you'll look it up afterwards if you want. So now Mitzvah Tazayin, it says Udam Nifal Kafi Pelusav, and Pashas means say is that you don't want to do it, and we said fake it until you make it, you don't want to do it anyways, and eventually you're going to want to go do it. It's magic, it has a magic key, so it's a great way to do anything. You don't want to do something, do it anyways, and eventually you're going to want to do it. That is the basic understanding of, and how Pashas are taught to Chinuch. To the point of here is, that is how Chinuch in general, we say it works, right? You don't want to do it, I'm going to force you to do it. Eventually you're going to want to go do it, and it always works, right? And the Rebbe Chai that forces you to go learn, and eventually you become the biggest masmid, and that's all you go learn. That's the mitzvah also, you don't want to do it, the brech the middah, right? What was the Kelmite, we go that, I mean, each one had their own method of how they broke the middah. Was it they went to the opposite, they went to the grocery store, precisely they went to go to ask for nails, or those things, right? It's a brech and the thing of Gava, and then it made the person the most docile, the most best person in the world. I mean, that's partially what the Chinuch says, right? You have to go do a masa, and do the masa, then you're going to change your whole internal thing, right? So obviously, that's really not what the Chinuch says. I mean, if you have to it's also be very simple with that. I mean, to train people, then be very simple. For an animal, it does really work, and that is like a behaviorism, which we'll get to in a second. Usually works, but precisely because humans are not animals and we have whole different layers why it does not work in that way. But the reason why this is almost like an argument of showing how absurd it is, right? But here we're going to say why logically it seems that this reading seems to have an issue. Why? Because according to this reading, the formula has to be there's the outside action, which then forms the inner, right? So outside action, inner formation. That's how it has to go be. However, the way we explained, and I think I don't think anybody could really argue that that's how it works. There's no such thing as an outside, starting from an outside action. There's an inside source, or that's the third layer that we said. There's an inner source, which then gives an inward experience, which then makes an outward action. So an action doesn't come from nowhere. They're saying that therefore it could formulate the insight. If it's already coming from somewhere, then how in the world can an outside action rewire the whole internal stimulus of where it came from? So logically, it does not make sense to say that an outside action can easily transform the inside person if the outside action only came from the inside action. And that's how a person works. A person works from inside to an outside. So
also the reason that he does yes or no.
He does. Now, first of all, okay, so I can jump ahead. So there's a few things. First of all, the real answer is we don't really know what animals experience. That's the problem in general, right? All these things, philosophy on the animals, we don't really know. But we do know what we observe, right? And we do know that animals are a lot easier to train through outside stimulation. We'll get to it, Okay, should I jump ahead or not? We'll get right back to it. You'll see, it's behaviorism really. There is a shitta in psychology that does deal like this. It's called behaviorism, right? Skinner, that he's the one that thing. Technically, the famous Pavlov dog experiment is the same thing, right? They get the bell and they train them. There's concept of training through external action. We'll get that in a second. So Lamasa, the problem over here is actions forms according to its source. And therefore, to say that an outside source could easily transform the inside source is tzurichin. Meaning it logically. Mitzvah says it doesn't do like that because again, which child became a big masmid because the Rebbe forced him to learn, right? Simple as that. Which person, Okay. All right. So the masa. That's Pashas really not what the chinuch means. So this might be the other chinuch. So let's go back to the model, the three levels of the Middah, which I spoke about before, right? The external action, the internal feeling the person has, and then the interpretive source, which is what we call the person, how he interprets the outside external stimuli into action, into feeling, and then into action. Right? So now, there's three forms. We're not going to give a history of psychology right now, but I'm going to bring out the three forms of psychology, three shittas, three schools, three ideas of psychology, which psychology basically is pashtus. Again, obviously this is sort of a caricature, although Sachem is the name, but basically the point of psychology is to go and separate to go and change the person, right? Pashtus, otherwise, what exactly is it? There's a problem, and here to help the person. Generally helping either by reframing things or by changing the person. Both is still going to change the person. So now, there are three schools of thought. There's behaviorism, there's CBT. These are very, very common today's days. And then there is psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis really includes anything, includes something as so far as depth psychology, which is the Jungian form. We'll have the Freudian form, Lacanian form, whatever. All there's many different forms. These are the basic, we call them umbrella organizations. Umbrella under these three things is what most it's not psychoanalytical goof is psychoanalysis, but basically is, okay, now what is behaviorism? Behaviorism is the theory of, which we were just speaking about before, that an action changes a different action. Meaning to say is, and let's say that basically is a child. The basic. We do work like that. And this is about this. There's MS to it, right? When you want a child to do something, we call positive reinforcement. So what is positive reinforcement? We say that if you do so and so, or if he does say, if you're telling him to do so and so, that means it's not necessarily even going to change his behavior. Right? The question. For instance, a mushal, right? You always want a child to be mevatel, right? So there's a fight between two children, and there's two chairs, and it was only one chair, and both want the chair. So what do? You see who's going to be mevatel. If you tell the kid, if you be mevatel, I'll give you a candy, right? So now one kid's going to be mevatel, but that wasn't any vatrunis at all. He didn't give up the chair. He wanted the candy instead of the chair, right? So that's not really behaviorism. You're not teaching him a change in behavior. Right? A positive reinforcement is a lot more subtle than that. What basically is, if you do so and so, I'll give you. If you be mevatel, because they're basically giving him a choice of either take the chair or take the candy. If you want the candy, I'm taking the candy, not the chair. The next time, I'm not going to give you the chair because I'm not getting something for it. But positive reinforcement is somewhat similar to that. And what we say is that you do for every positive action that you do, I'm going to go make a chart. You'll build up towards something. You did something good, I'll give you something, right? That is what technically positive reinforcement means. Meaning, I'm going to make it eventually through actions. By doing many of these actions, you're going to continuously train yourself to do that action. So, of course, there is. If in therapy, what would it be? For instance, a person. So the negative aspect is that a person has anxiety. When he's afraid of steps, afraid of heights, right? So he's afraid of steps. Let's say you're going past a certain thing. So anytime he goes near it, he gets anxious. So he goes away. And then he does not have any anxiety. So he learns avoidance behavior to avoid going near a step, because whenever he goes near a step, he has anxiety. So that is take, that action, plain simple action, actually could train the person to do certain things, because action take does bring different action. The Pavlov experience is the same concept, that eventually it learned to connect that one action means a different action. So that is a bit more complex, more nuanced than that, the Pavlov experience really, because by ringing the bell and the dog learned that it's going to have a meal, it's not so much that we don't even know if it has a cause and effect. The more they associated the bell with a meal. But again, these are basically, is in a nutshell, without getting into a whole deep down of what a behavioral theory is. The behavioral theory over here is that one action will bring a different action. So therefore, if you change an action, you'll change the thing. If you're going to, like exposure therapy is very much dependent on this. By eventually giving the person who's afraid to go near steps because he gets anxious, he'll bring a little closer. Eventually, he'll learn through behavior to modify his behavior. That is behaviorism. Now, on the basic reading of the Chinuch, that's really what he's saying. That if you'll go and you'll do the mitzvah, eventually you're going to do the mitzvah, but it's tzaychu, we want to go do it. Now, CBT is slightly different. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a bit different. How does that work? Cognitive behavioral therapy, basically working over here, is not just looking at the external action the person is doing. Because a behavioral thing is, I don't know ultimately what's going on in the person's act, like an animal. I don't know what the animal is actually thinking, what is causing you to do it. What I do know is that it has associative behavior. If it does such and such, then such and such happens. So if you change such and such, then such and such will change. That is the basic theory. I'm disregarding the internal mechanics because I don't know what it is anyways. And even a person will tell you that's what he believes, that's what he feels, that's what he thinks. That means you have to presuppose he even knows what he's thinking, what he feels, which is also a supposition which cannot be supported by anything. CBT says, no, I'm not going to disregard a person's actual internal feelings and how he interprets, because it's just the opposite. I'm going to look and say, what happened to make the person act so and so? What thought arose when like he's going to be afraid he's going to fall down? That's his very right. So now, by trying to change his thought pattern, I could affect his external action. So it's very much just the opposite. I am going to acknowledge a person's internal mechanism, internal thought, internal understandings, and through that, I'm going to change his behavior. That is CBT. So if we want to look from the Middah model, which we explained, then we could view it like this: that behavioralism is very much completely in the external action. The first thing, basically, I watch the person, he says did so and so. So that is basically the external model of the Middah, when the person did something. Mashainkain CBT is very much thinking of the second tier. I'm looking at what experience did the person have, what thought, what was the emotion the person had, and therefore which caused the behavior to happen. They're going a step before. Psychoanalysis, or actual psychology, is trying to do something a lot more ambitious, which is also, it's a lot harder. It's also, whatever, go to statistics, whatever it is. Why is it more difficult? Because they're trying to actually understand the actual makeup of this person, his what was his history which caused him to view things like this, and therefore to experience it like this, and therefore to act like that. So that is a complete different layer. In other words, what it's doing is, psychoanalysis is trying to understand the human on its own term, the person on its own term, not just what emotion did you feel. Why did you feel that thing with this so-and-so? Because of your history, because of, every single psychoanalysis, every single form of psychoanalysis has a different theory of what forms the human, right? And so we're getting, like the Jungian framework will be one way, the Freudian, Lacanian framework will be a different way. But all have in common is they're trying to understand that the person does certain things that the person didn't, let's say, metabolize correctly, certain things he didn't go through yet, meaning certain stages in his growth and development which he didn't go through yet, and which is the reason why he views certain stimuli as being to interpret it to mean so and so, and that's why he felt such and such, and that's why he did such and such. So these three layers, is a bit of a caricature, but there's a lot of truth in it, I believe. Now these three layers of the Middah are three forms of psychology, or three forms of helping, of changing, trying to change a person, a theory of changing the person. So now, bring this back to the Chinuch. The Chinuch is saying that udam nifal pi pelusav, the vulgar reading, which means the basic understanding, the basic reading is he is a behavioralist. He's saying is you do external action and you'll change it. You'll change your external action. However, we don't like this pshat in the Chinuch. The mitzvah says it doesn't really. So even though yes, it's possible that if you do it, you'll do it by rote. Yeah. So you're used to always doing a mitzvah, so you continue doing the mitzvah, right? But the question is, does that have any actual, does that have any Torah worth? Does that have any actual religious worth? So here we already started getting into Lishma and Shaloi Lishma. So we're going to shelve this question for a minute. But regardless of which, if we say he's not a behavioralist, we're trying to say that he is not someone that just simply is, you do outside external actions, you'll change and you continue doing external actions. Let me say is a Chinuch is trying to say something deeper. You change your external actions, will change your internal actions, which means you're doing the model, let's go with the third model, a psychoanalytical model. But then the question is, how exactly does this work? Right, because that is exactly the question that we asked. If every single action is automatically filtered through the third layer, the deepest layer, what formed the person, and that's why he felt so and so, such and such, and that's why he did that action, and the Chinuch is saying is that this action will change the internal, then we have to understand where does the loop sort of finish, because we started off, we only did the action because of the internal component with the way the person interprets the external stimuli, and then he went all the way to the action. So the internal to external, so how does the external change the internal? That is the question that we're dealing with. So we have to make a difference between two types of coercion, and one is a pitoida and one is not a pitoida. What do I mean by this? Let's say a person does not want to give tzedakah. He doesn't want to give, whatever reason, whether he's attached to the money or he just doesn't feel, he doesn't feel in the mood of it, whatever reason it is. Person doesn't want to daven, whatever reason, either because he's going through a lot. It makes many reasons why he doesn't want to do something. Yet he says, "I'm going to do it anyways." Why? Because I have to do an action. I have to do it. That's what's prescribed to me. I have no option, right? So now let me say it. He didn't want to do it, but he was coerced to do it. Now this coercion is very different than when we speak about coercion. What do we say coercion? The person was forced externally. There's a person standing over. A Rebbe stood over him with a stick and told him, if you learn, it's great. If you don't learn, that's a chappen, yeah. So it was like he was forced to do it externally. By Gittin, we have the concept of external coercion. We're not going to get into that exactly, even in the end, how that works in, because maybe later we get to Lishma exactly. But basically, that is external coercion. I have somebody outside of me who is forcing me to do this action. The Chinuch is saying a completely different type of coercion. It's internal coercion. I don't want to do it. I'm not in the mood. But Lamasa, I feel I have to do it because ich ben ayid. That is called Kabulas Oil Malchashmai. Chassidus is very into this thing that the first.
It's what forms the person.
It forms. It's.
So that's
right.
No,
yeah.
that's the third part that is being so.
That's what the external. Let's do Mesiddik. So basically, is in Chassidus. That basically is in Chabad, especially you have the kind of shumu and gufa that means to say is it's kabul. The first thing before anything is kabul al machshemaim. That is the first thing. Why? Even the period, so I didn't print it out. Whatever, don't have time for it anyways. the first level is always kabuz onach shmaim. Why? Kabuz onach shmaim means to say is you're being forced to do something by your own internal mechanism, not something outside coercing you. This coercion is an internal coercion. That is one form of coercion. Now, I don't want to do something, but I'm doing it anyways. Because a different form is that a person who wants to give tzedakah, he wants to go, he wants to give, not enough, he wants to give even more than he can. Why? He wants people to, he'll make sure that oilem zaitis, he makes him feel good, it makes give him a position in the community, or he could go and make that other person feel bad. So these are things that he wants to do the mitzvah, and he does it. So we have two people doing a mitzvah, both of them not doing it lishma, whatever lishma means, and not zechenish lishma. And the question then is, who is actually even more religiously better? From outside, externally, who is doing it more meis lahavas? Who's doing it more meis sefayit? The one that is doing it because he wants the kavod, because he actually wants to do it. The one that's doing it because he's not in the mood, he's doing it anyways, he's even doing it less. So these are two forms of shaloi lishma, which are very different. Because the one is, I don't want to do it, I'm doing it because that's what Hashem told me to do. I'm doing it at kibbutz oil. Because the Masa, he's not doing, he's only doing it. No, it's actually a good question. Because the Masa, if we touch Lishma, that I'm doing the mitzvah, well, that's how I'm doing it, no? I'm doing it not because Hashem wanted. I mean, this is, but how is this not Lishma? So the question is a good question, although then we have to get into Lishma. And there are Yesh Toyim Medove, and you give whole thing and speak against the Rishonim, precisely because they have a complete misunderstanding of Lishma. We say is that you're doing an action just for the action's sake. So here, you can make your argument even sharper. That here, this is mamash Shema, because there's no external telling me I'm doing a mamash as Hashem wanted. And I'm doing Hashem. I'm learning as Hashem told me to do. I mean, what exactly is the thing? So you're saying here, learn. So the reason why it's not Lashma is because you're not learning learning for the sake of Torah. So that's already a nuance, because then a mitzvah is doing the mitzvah. Okay, let's get to a. We get back to exactly why it's fine. But the Maaseh says it's two. One thing is sure, it's two forms of shaloi lishma. One is a shaloi lishma, which I don't want to do it. I'm doing it because I have kabus amach shemaim. One is I want to do it because I am getting a lot of benefit from it. I'm making myself better. I'm making the person feel bad, or I can make the poor person feel bad by just doing it in a bad way. I want to do it. And from the outside, many times I look at the person that is doing it for the wrong reason. He's doing it even better. It's meis lahavas, and he's doing it with alle hedidim. Not only is he doing it, he wants the oilim to think that he's a tzad, that he's doing it right. So therefore, he does it even. He has the nicest aesthetic. Because, what do you mean? That's going to make me get a status. So I'm mamish the mekayim zekai levanvayi. I have the nicest essay. I'm even more than a shleish. I gave half a crazy amount of money because it makes it look better. And who has a nicer essay, right? And so it's two different forms of shaloi lishma. Which one is better? Which one is actually, so just because of the way I framed it, it seems obvious that obviously the one that's doing Yom Shemaim is better. But Tavos Taka, why? The Masa one is doing more Sachem Sahabas, Sachem from Achsi Shebren, no? So the problem over here is then that the issue that we're circling is not wanting to do the mitzvah, so wanting to do the mitzvah from the wrong form, from the wrong source, or the wrong cause. That is the problem. So not wanting then to do something is not the same as wanting from a bad motive. One is doing it because I'm commanded, and one is doing it because he wants to do it, it feels better, it gives him some standing. And there's two different sources. So now the Chinuch is saying that you don't want to, we'll go bring back to the Chinuch. Maybe we should go to Piyuret first. So, the Piyuret basically is, we're going to read one line now, that the Piyuret, when he says, it's in Daled again, and he explains the difference between the Shaloi Lishma, which is a problem, and the Shaloi Lishma, which we say La'olim Yaskudim Shaloi Lishma. He says that it's the second paragraph of Os Daled. Kiva Perashti Shehi Shaloi Lishma Levad Sha'en Kevenusoi Kiyim Lezeh. The only thing he wants is this Shaloi Lishma. What does he want? He wants precisely the Shaloi. What is the Shaloi Lishma aspect of it? The kavuna he's having is shalei lishma. He's doing it because, not because he doesn't want it, he's doing it because he is getting kavod, he's getting a status, and that is what he wants. It's not the mitzvah that he wants. He wants that shalei lishma part. That is noich lo shnepach shliyus halpunav. Masha'ain kain, the one that be'etzem yishroi to luchef as atzma lishma. He wants to force himself to do lishma, but he's not holding at that level that he could do it. This person that's doing it, he be'etzem would want to do lishma, but he can't do lishma. He's not at the level to do lishma. So he forces himself to do it shaloi lishma, shaloi lishma bu lishma. What is this forcing? This forcing is to do it because this is the way to get to lishma. It's not something be'etzem wants to do. It's forcing himself to do it because through this I get to shaloi lishma. Now, the next part exactly more the nuances of the previous, we don't have time for this week. We'll see when we get to it. But
he's not doing it because he wants to get the Shema. He's doing it because he was told that he has to do it.
Yeah, and that is a shalei lishma part.
He's not doing it to get to the Shema.
No, that is the Shema.
So
the Shema he doesn't want to do it, I guess.
So why? So let me see understand what you're asking is Lamasa that he's doing this. Let's say go to the chinuch. He's coerced. He feels that he has to do it because this is the mitzvah. He has no option. So that doesn't mean he's doing the shaloi lishma because he wants to get the lishma. He's doing shaloi lishma because that's what Hashem said to do.
Yeah.
Right?
If that's considered shaloi lishma.
That is a shaloi lishma. Right? So you're saying
have to get to why it's considered shaloi lishma.
Right, but let's lanich is shaloi lishma. So you're saying your question is so Pashas, what the period seems to be saying is that he's doing it. He has no option, but he he wants to do lishma. He wants to.
Meaning he wants to get to it. Who said he wants to get to it? He doesn't want it. He wants to do it because that's what he was told that he has to do.
Right. So there's two answers to this. So the first answer is really, which is what we're going to be expounding on now, is because this is the Piyudas and the Chinuch, they're saying the same structural concept, but they're not saying the same thing. Because the E06 meant a different type of person. As I said, that the mushal that he gave in Pasha's Devurim, that person has to go bury, wants to get the diamonds, he has to go bury the thing. In other words, he doesn't want to do it because he knows he's doing it wrong. And that's what he doesn't want to do, because he's not doing the Shema. So why should I do the mitzvah? Like you do it because you have to get to it anyways. Because that's a way to get to it. They're both, so you're right, there's two different aspects. They're saying two different, the nuance is slightly different, the structure is the same, and they're both over here responding to a very important question is that the Chazal make a sound as it's magic. It's a fact. You're going to get to lishma. This is really b'tzurichin, because Pashas, according to, if this understanding Chazal, every single person should be doing a lishma at this point. I mean, how many years do we need to do lishma to get to lishma? The oilam has to do always, right? We should always.
I guess it depends which type of shlo lishma. That's what.
So that's what he's saying over here.
So he's saying
Depends on which type of shlo lishma.
Exactly. So in other words, what he's responding to is also this thing: how is it possible that you say I can guarantee you do shlo lishma, going to get to lishma? Mitzvah, it's not like that, right? Otherwise, then every single person is doing the lishma. We all daven. I mean, we daven put on film, we do mitzvahs, right? So. A Yeda mitzvah I mean, what is a Yeda? So in other words, there's a mechanism here that they're both dealing with. And the dealing over here is that you're forcing yourself to do it, not, the Shalishma here is a forcing to do it. It's not that you want to do it for the wrong reason. It's not that you want to do the mitzvah because I'm not Shiki Rebbe, or you should be able to have kavod, you should get a position. That is, you want to do it. That is a shalishma which you want to do it. And the cause, the motivation is a negative, a bad motivation. But I can hear the motivation is something that you don't want to do it, but you're doing it because that's what Hashem told you that you have to do it anyways. It's a coercion, it's a motivation of internal motivation. Let's go back to the chinuch. The chinuch is clearly talking about somebody that doesn't want to do it. Not doing it for no reason. That does not want to do the mitzvahs. So why are you doing the mitzvah thing? Because eventually you do all the mitzvahs, eventually it's going to make you do it the shema. That is what the chinuch is saying. Look it up in Middah Tazayin. Now the question over the question over here is that this motivation. So when do we say amanas that noich lo shnepach shliyos apunov, a different type of thing, right? So the question, in others, hold on for a second. The question over here was on the chinuch. how is it possible that external action is going to change internal? Being that every action comes from the internal. The answer is, according to how we sort of separate it, is really very simple. If the internal action, the internal motivation is done as kabus al machshmaim, then what is it strengthening? It's strengthening your concept of kabus. It's strengthening listening to Hashem. It is strengthening to a pure motivation. It's not coming from an ego. It's not coming from a kavod place. It's not coming from a place because you want to hurt somebody. So if you're shaloi lishma, it's because you want to have something from someone, meaning you want to be a big person, you want to have a position in the community or whatever, is there, yes. Your internal point is causing the external action, which will then reinforce the internal action. Not only that, because you're even telling yourself that I'm doing this, but not tzaddik, what happens eventually is you're going to associate what your negative motivations into actual lishma. Eventually, the more you do it, if you're coming from a wrong place, you're eventually going to you're going to turn yourself into a monster. You're going to turn yourself into somebody who ich mein alles Hashem Shemayim. Precisely because the mechanism is correct. Precisely because it doesn't come from nowhere, an action doesn't come from nowhere. Precisely because an action comes from the internal person, from the internal interpretive faculty of the person, and which goes and becomes an external action. And therefore, when you bring mekoyich ala poyol, when you actually put into form, it then could reinforce the actual motivation which caused it to happen. And if that's the case, if you're coming from a place of not only the Chassidim, I mentioned that last week, I think the Chassidim, the Avodas is also clearly about the Tzedukah. The point over here is that they're very, even of a Nashiyaki Rebbe, we're going to have to sort of fine-tune this in Lamasa, but even a Nashiyaki Rebbe, they're extremely suspicious to say that's considered, that they even allowed to go do it. It's not the Shaloi Lishma, which is might be allowed Lishma. It has the same level of the content. It's not the same level of the content. I mean, but they both have the point over here is that structurally they're the same, because they're both coming from a negative place. They both come from a negative motivation. And therefore, what happens over here is precisely the external action reinforces the negative motivation. And if it reinforces the negative motivation, what happens over here is then you simply become a monster, because you become somebody who's alles Shema, and then alles Shema is your negative motivation. What it's talking about is that you don't want to do it, but you're doing because Hashem said. What happens over here is your internal motivation is to do it because there's something greater than me, something bigger than me, there's something in life which is greater than me. It's not a negative motivation, and that would eventually reinforce the internal motivation. So when that's the Avodas is saying over here is that the luchef es atzmoi, you don't have to force yourself to do it if you're doing it because you want to have kavod. Then you're not forcing yourself. He's saying the same structure. You're right, it's slightly different, but the structure is the same. Luchef es atzmoi means you have to force yourself to do it. You don't force yourself if you want to do it for kavod. You don't force yourself if you want to get something out of it. It's not forcing yourself.
Yeah, it doesn't sound from his notion that he's trying to do it lishma.
His intention
has to be that he wants to get to the Shema. That guy, who said his intention is to get to the Shema? He's just doing it because he has to do it.
You're correct. He's doing it because he has to do it. However,
not to get to the Shema.
So let's go drop into what lishma means in Pashas. Right. We can't get. I mean, it's already over well over time. But just a small nuance. Just answer this thing because it's an important distinction, Masa. Because your viewing over here is that this is the reason why you're asking this question is because the Pasha is that you're saying there's three categories. There's doing an action lishma, shaloi lishma, and just doing it.
Because Absha said.
Yeah. What?
Because Absha said.
Yeah, but it means then what is the difference between doing it l'shaloi lishma, amanashi luvi lishma, to doing it lishma, and shaloi lishma because Hashem said? Sure. When I'm doing something is I want to do it correctly, right? That means to say, why do I want to do it correctly? As self-interest? For self-interest? Why do I want to do it correctly? Because it's going to make me to a better person? Or because...
Why do I want to do what Hashem said?
Well, that's is an odd question. I mean, others, okay, but Hashem said so and so. Why should I want to go do it? Right? I guess the bigger question is, a tzaddik, can a tzaddik do hepech of ritzon Hashem?
If he can. If he wants to, yeah. It doesn't want.
Yeah. So but the point, not only that, but he never wants. So the mitzvah is that
That's the problem with tzaddik. The binary is the person that ultimately has.
So
has
exactly. So
is difficult to kill. So and his whole schar is only because he was at a certain point. He worked to get to the point of being.
I'm asking a different question. I'm asking over here is, that means then the tzaddik can't even fathom doing something connected to Hashem, right? Let me say is that tzaddik is doing it purely from self-motivation. From self, I can say, he wants to feel good. I mean, I can't do the opposite. Tzaddik is the biggest shaloi lishma possible, no? The tzaddik is the biggest shaloi lishma? Because, well, that's a long conversation, but the point that I'm... Arichis? Meaning to do an Avodah? Yeah, but it's not a tzaddik. It's not a goof can do the Avodah, right? The point of the tzaddik, the point is a real. So you went to the extreme of a real tzaddik, even if it's not right. There's a little lechul hepech, right? Eskafi and eshavche. Even when eskafi, the point is a tzaddik can never actually do a poil masa because it's something so foreign to him, right? So it's like saying is that because something person was trained that he can do something that means he's doing it for self-interest. Okay, again. The point I'm saying here is that the end of the day here is the difference that you're trying to make is not so stark. The difference is saying I don't want to do it wrong because I want to do it correctly, is because that is what Hashem said, right? The minute it becomes self-interested because that makes me feel good, that is not wanting to do it lishma. If I want to do a shaloi, if my shaloi lishma is...
No, I understand if someone does something with wrong intentions, that's definitely shaloi lishma.
Right. But my point is, the minute you're saying is, I don't want to do it because that's what Hashem said, I want to do the Shema because Hashem said, that's already going into Shaloi Shema, it's the wrong motivation. What is the motivation? Because it makes you feel good? Because it put into people are going to think you're a tzaddik? So that's already a wrong motivation. The only real motivation to do something with the Shema, guess what Hashem said. Because the minute is not what Hashem said, the minute it's not that's not motivation, that's not the Shema. That's the wrong motivation, Shaloi Lishma, which is not what we're talking about. So that means ultimately, it's saying the same thing.
What I'm trying to say is that a person wanting to do looks at the small meaning he wants to do the right thing. And he wants to do the right thing means he wants to do the
correctly.
Hashem, to do Hashem in its pure form, whatever that means. Which we don't know what that means yet. So that means he wants to force himself to do the small. That's exactly it's the same thing.
Right.
Okay, so we have to still define why
Define
why that's considered July.
Yeah. Right, because here we're talking about motivation here. We're not talking about the end result, right? What I'm aiming at. Where's the motivation coming from? The minute the motivation is coming from a negative place, meaning a wrong motivation, that's already not the Shaloi Shema we're talking about. It's not what the Chinuch is talking about, and that's not what the Periodist is talking about. It's Shaloi Shema because it's not done for the correct attention. In other words,
so what is the correct intention?
That's the type of discussion. The point that today's what we to sharpen this whole thing, what we're discussing now is the intention, the motivation, not the end, not the definition. We haven't defined, in truth, we haven't even defined exactly what the Shaloi Lishma be'etzem means. We defined the real motivation. What is the motivation of Shaloi Lishma? But two forms of motivation of Shaloi Lishma. One is, as Hashem said, and one is because I have a wrong motivation. What the actual definitions of Lishma is, or even Shaloi Lishma to a certain extent, we really haven't discussed yet. Because is that even, it's Nagaya, but to understand this distinction, it's not so Nagaya, and it's a whole separate discussion. So that is...
So the motivation of, because Hashem said, is the motivation of Lishma. To get to the Shema.
To get it. That's
It allows the Lishma. It allows to get to
No,
Right.
that he wants the Lishma.
Yeah.
He wants the Lishma, yeah, but that means not that he wants it for self-grandeur.
You say that the motivation is, I don't want to do it, but I'm only doing it as Hashem said, meaning to get to the Shema.
By definition. Okay. So we have to just really shorten the whole thing. Only other thing I'm going to go just to bring out The only other thing I would go bring out then, just I don't want to, I think it's just an important thing, is Lamase, people are not black and white. There's no only one motivation in that. There's always multiple different motivations, which we have to, that's why the Chavis always mentioned, which is very important, the concept of Yichud Lamase. To be honest with yourself is very important, obviously, especially the way we're understanding over here, is there is no real single motivation, Lamase. Ultimately, there's no, the person only does it for one thing. If I have to look at the Pintla or the definition of what the Pintla means, also, what is the Ochad Hashem Shemaim, whatever that means. The Shema Shemaim, the same thing or not. Again, these are all different points, but I don't think I think the basic point I want to get to, I think we got to. The thing we intended to get to, we got to. Yeah.
Good.